All right, everyone. Thank you for your patience while we get started here. This is session 6A, preparing and responding to the archival impacts of climate change. I'm Melissa Gonzalez. I'll be assisting with moderation for this session. I've provided a link to the rules of engagement, which y'all are probably all familiar with, having attended a few sessions by now. Please take time to read and understand them. The session's being recorded and will be available after the conference concludes. You can turn your closed captioning on by pressing the Show Captions button, which is at the bottom of your screen in the menu bar. I'll be monitoring the chat and the Q&A, which we will address at the end after all the presentations have been given. Thank you and enjoy your session.
Well, thank you to oh my God, I already did it. The Society of Southwest Archivists. It's a lot easier just to do the whole thing. For hosting our panel virtually. I actually think it is really helpful to have hybrid or virtual conferences moving forward, not just for ease of access, but also for climate issues. Although I very much enjoyed a conference recently that took me thousands of miles away in an 8-hour plane ride, it's a bit of a climate impact for 15 minutes of presentation. With that said, I'm really excited to kind of be spearheading this particular panel discussion. We'll start off with my presentation, then we will shift to Krista's, and last but definitely not least will be Daena's presentation, and then we will have time at the end for questions. And yes, next year is in Lafayette, so we should all be there in person. Okay, so our presentation on PROTECCT-GLAM, which stands for Providing Risk of the Environment's Changing Climate Threats for Galleries, Libraries, Archives, and Museums. It's a very long acronym, and I thank Jill, one of our co-PIs on the project, for helping to come up with a catchy acronym for the project. This project is funded by the Institute of Museum and Library Services for our first 3 years, soon to be 4 years of the project. So I will begin by just providing a little bit of background. We'll talk about the GLAM data set and then introduce where we are at with the PROTECCT-GLAM scale, when I will hand a little bit of the presentation over to one of our graduate assistants, Emily Fischer, who will talk a little bit about ArcGIS and what she's been doing with it. And then we'll wind up with next steps. And we always say questions at the end, but it's going to be at the end. So first off, this research project really began with thinking about what the specific climate change risks that are related to GLAMs, galleries, libraries, archives, and museums. And luckily enough, a colleague of mine, Jill, is a climatologist and in geography, and working together really just seemed like a good approach to leverage both of our areas of expertise to really map out, could we develop a categorical scale, similar to how there's categories for hurricanes and tornadoes, and just something that could be used to quickly identify what types of risks an individual GLAM could be facing in the near future. In order to do this, we had to identify what the GLAM-specific climate change challenges are. And then the final part of our project that we haven't done yet, and will be at the end, is hosting an institute bringing together practitioners and researchers so we can collaborate on developing a research agenda with priorities, rather than all of us going after the same grant funding, working together to address specific needs. The first major hurdle was building out a full GLAM data set. There were many different individual data sets for the different aspects. So museums had one, public libraries had one, the archives repo data set. The National Center for Educational Statistics has one for academic libraries. There wasn't one for military libraries. We actually had to create that out of whole cloth. But merging these data sets together for the first time was a little bit more complicated than initially thought. Once we put everything together, we found there were about 15,000 entries that just only listed a PO box, or the addresses were all wonky. And so we actually had to enlist about 40 graduate and undergraduate students to manually go through 15,000 entries and correct them. And actually, some of them are here today. But our final data set includes roughly 78,000 entries. And in the last 6 months, we've actually updated or added about 1,500 more based on feedback from the community. Because one of the big limitations is that we're missing a lot of community-based repositories that were never captured by the national institutions. So we created an online form that people can submit updates or additions to the data set. And this data set is available for anybody to use. There will be a QR code at the end that you can use to access it, or just go to, it's protectglam.lsu.edu, either spelled normally or with 2 C's. We have both covered. So just a little snapshot of what some of the low-level, like low-hanging fruit approach of just if we look at the prediction for 3-foot sea level rise by 2100 at the 5 kilometer, 15 kilometer, and 30 kilometer of the coast, this is how many GLAMs would be affected. There's 16,877 individual GLAMs within 30 kilometers of a coastline. And that is dangerous. But I believe the next slide is where Emily starts talking. Yes?
Yeah.
Okay.
So we basically kind of did some preliminary analysis back in June before I came in on the project, kind of just looking at this data and just seeing like the distribution of this data, especially across like the Gulf coastal states. I have actually went in and changed the colors and coordination for all of this. You'll see in the later slides. But this is kind of like just the basis of looking at this data, trying to understand this data. The next slide actually is my GLAM distribution map. I took the 78,000 GLAM points and I created a heat map across the United States. I did not include Alaska or Hawaii in this. This is just the 48. But you can tell that around the northeastern side that we are seeing a huge hotspot of GLAM distributions, which makes sense for the area. There's a lot of cultural heritage in that area. It's very significant. However, if you go across the United States, you can see that there's hotspots around those centers. There's also what we like to call a GLAM desert, where there's not as many GLAMs. But the next slide, I kind of go in and I zoom in on an area, and I made a 5, 15, 30 kilometer buffer range from the coastline. And I've actually, since making this, I have overlaid the 3 feet of sea level rise on top of this, and it just ever so slightly encroaches on that 5 kilometer buffer. So any of those archives that are within that buffer zone will most likely, sadly, be underwater. And I think this really illustrates the idea that we need to like look at where these are located along the coastline. The next one will be the libraries. And you could kind of tell they're kind of centering around that Boston area. And then the last one will be museums. And if you combine them all together, you kind of have this huge like hotspot around Boston. And you can see throughout that some of these GLAMs are like kind of on that line of a 30-kilometer, 15-kilometer like buffer zone. And I think it's really important to consider like moving forward, like how that's going to be impacted, especially with like storm surge and sea level rise.
Thank you, Emily. Now, I will note, we asked Emily to focus just in on one area, because if we look at the entire US, it gets a little overwhelming with all the dots. And it gets hard to really see. So this was just kind of a quick glance at what we looked at. And through our discussions, we have another colleague who's not joining us today, who has an expertise in heat and humidity, and bringing in that data as well. We've identified 5 variables that we are going to include in a scale that we're just going to call the PROTECCT-GLAM scale, mainly because there are enough scientific scales named after old white dead guys. And I'm not dead, but you know, we don't need another white guy scale. Sorry, that was a bad joke. But so the 5 variables we're looking at is hurricane wind occurrence and storm surge, which Jill has expertise in. 3 feet of sea level rise, which is the 100-year expectation. The FEMA 100-year flood zones, exceeding 23 to 27 degrees Celsius air temperature, and over 9.3 degrees Celsius dew point, which is equivalent to 50% relative humidity at 20 degrees. Okay. And now is the point where I get to talk about Fahrenheit and Celsius. I'm really hoping that as our field moves forward, we can start shifting towards using Celsius and dew point rather than Fahrenheit and relative humidity. The Celsius, simply because it's easier to communicate with non-US scientific community. But the dew point and relative humidity, dew point is a much more accurate representation of humidity and potential humidity than relative humidity. And so we are going to try and slightly nudge us towards using dew point instead of humidity. Sorry, that was a little bit of a rant. Okay, so the scale, to make it very easy to understand, we are going to give each variable a grade. So a particular institution will receive a grade for each variable, and then an overall grade for each institution. And we're using a 0 to 4 scale, which translates nicely into A to F for the academics. So for a hypothetical example, anybody who's ever taken a class with me knows Sagamore, my favorite fictional town. The Sagamore Museum has an F for hurricane risk, an F for sea level rise, a D for flood, air temperature D, dew point F. I will just say Sagamore Museum is probably located on Grand Isle, just in Louisiana, based on this. So overall, they would have an F rating. And this would be indicated on an interactive, what are called GIS experiences. These are interactive maps on a website where the general public, anybody can go in and see the various grade sheets for each repository and zoom in, zoom out. Am I explaining that correct, Emily? Yeah, it's an interactive space rather than what are known as is it stories?
Yeah, there's story mappings, which are more static and don't really allow the public to really interact with the data. So with GIS Experience Builder, it will allow you guys to actually interact with the data and look at your like institution.
Now, I will note this is not the final step in this research project. We are already applying for additional funding to add more data. Specifically, I am applying for an NEH grant to collect survey data or survey our most at-risk institutions about their building conditions. When was it built? What is the construction? Do they have emergency management plans? Things like that. And hopefully Emily in her dissertation work will continue some of this work in a different direction as well, looking more at, I forgot what they're called. It's not, it's
social vulnerability is what I wanted to look at.
yeah, there you go. We had a whole conversation about geographers have different names for things. But what we're doing in the immediate short term, this summer, Emily and Jill are going to work with one of the defined regions and test everything out and start overlaying the data and make sure that everything's working well before we break it out. And whatever region that is, we will be giving sneak preview access to the regional library, archives, and museum world to provide some feedback on that as well. One surprising thing, or not surprising, these climate models are extremely large, the data sets. One of them started Emily's computer on fire because it was at the county level. And when you add up all the data of all the counties across the entire United States, you have a large file. And so we've been kind of working around that a little bit. We bought Emily a new computer too, because that would help. And like I said, the very last thing is this institute that we will be holding. It was going to be next year, but we're pushing it off for another year to make sure that we have everything where we want it to be before having those discussions. So here's the QR code. If you want to take a look at the data set and see if anything's missing, there's also a link that visualizes the whole data set. So you can actually see what it all looks like, the US with all the data points. And we're going to hold the questions until the very end, but thank you very much. And now I'm going to hand things off by not sharing screen anymore to Krista. You know what I never did? I never said, hi, I'm Ed Benoit. Okay. Anyway, Krista, you're up.
Not full screen. Actually, I'm gonna stop sharing screen really quick. Sorry, for a moment. It's not full screen, and I'm not sure how to make it full screen.
If you go under slideshow.
Okay.
Oh, you got it.
Okay, cool. Okay. Hi, I'm Krista Hollis. I'm the assistant archivist at the Mail Collection. And today I'm going to be talking about climate change in greening Southwestern archives. So I wanted to start out with an acknowledgement that America exists on land that was stolen through the processes of colonialism, and that the greater Houston area was the traditional territory of many indigenous peoples, including but not limited to Karankawas, Coshada, Tonkawa, and Lipan Apache.
And I would like to implore attendees to read a book by a Native author. And I wanted to shout out Janine Smith for her presentation this morning on land acknowledgements. And this QR code links to the resources that Janine has put together. Okay, so diving in, I'm going to talk about the impacts of climate change. Just a really brief overview. So in case you aren't aware, climate change, a really simple definition is long-term changes to temperatures and historic weather patterns. Now there's a lot more detailed definitions you can get into, but that's just very, very basic level. So one of the major impacts of climate change that we've already been seeing and will continue to see moving forward is more frequent and severe natural disasters. So I've listed I've listed the natural disasters that impact SSA states. So severe thunderstorms, drought, tropical storms, depressions, tropical cyclones, hurricanes, hail, snow, freezing winter storms, extreme heat, wildfire, tornadoes, landspouts, straight line winds, flash flooding, earthquakes, and landslides. So we have lots of natural disasters that impact our states. But beyond natural disasters, we're seeing a lot of changes to our water sources, as the previous presentation discussed, right? Rising sea levels, but also during extreme heat and droughts, we're seeing record low riverbed water levels, changes to our wildlife habitats that are related to that, that can especially impact archives through pests. There's some more impacts of climate change include increased energy needs to maintain the artificial environments for our collections, impacts to supply chains for raw materials that are needed for archival supplies and operations, and seeing that reflected in the costs of these materials. And then climate migration means that we're going to see changes to our constituencies and their needs. So how can archives make a difference? I don't want to discount the fact that archives are not the major actors contributing to climate change. Those would be governments and large organizations and corporations that use the most resources and have the largest CO2 emissions and conduct activities that are harmful to the environment, such as drilling. But climate change and sustainability don't occur in a vacuum, and combating climate change and implementing sustainability efforts in aggregate as archives can go a long way. And then archives are also educational leaders in our communities. So I think it's important that we do what we can to play a role in combating climate change. Okay, so how do we contribute to climate change? Archives use a lot of energy, especially our HVAC units. We also rely heavily on electricity that still runs largely off of fossil fuels. Our ICT infrastructure that supports our digital preservation practices, our GAMs, our digital databases, those also heavily rely on lots of electricity, a lot of water usage, and they also generate a lot of e-waste. I want to point out that server farms, the water usage in them is usually potable. So that means it's drinking grade water. And there's a very small amount of drinking grade water on Earth. So just keep that in mind. Archives also can produce a significant amount of waste. A lot of times different departments will send a lot of materials to the archives, and then the archives are responsible for disposing of those things. And waste generation that happens in countries like America, a lot of times that waste is exported and then disposed of illegally, things like dumping and incineration. Archives also have a carbon footprint, just like all other organizations and different actors. And a carbon footprint, a very simple definition, is the greenhouse gas emissions caused directly or indirectly by people, products, or organizations. So, thinking about the life cycle of the materials that you're using. Okay, so SSA and sustainability. So sustainability is a core function of archival practice. As Ira mentioned in her presentation yesterday, the widely accepted definition of sustainability is meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And as archivists, we're called to manage and make accessible records of enduring value for present and future generations. So I think these two things greatly coincide. Okay, so as archivists, professional organizations like SSA guide our discipline, guide the practices that we use every day. And so we look to them to kind of help keep us up to date on new research and how to implement that. So our resources from our national organizations are not quite meeting our needs when it comes to sustainability. I want to give a lot of credit to ALA. They have done a lot to identify, or they have identified that sustainability and climate change are major issues that impact library science. And they've done a lot to address it. They've created an amazing resource list that I have found very useful with their sustainability roundtable called Sustain RT. However, there are over 500 resources on their resource list. And when you look up archive in the searchable list, there's only 2 results. I would argue they're not the most beneficial resources if somebody's trying to integrate sustainability into their archival practice without trying to become an expert. Yeah, there's a little bit of a lack there. And I would argue that as archivists, a lot of times we're wearing a lot of hats, and especially those solo archivists that are doing different things for their organization beyond just archive work. They don't necessarily have time to go and become an expert in sustainability and climate change to integrate those into their practice. So we really need something that is easy to access, easy to apply, and easy to navigate when it comes to sustainability practices. And I want to also give kudos to ALA for their resources for when librarians face book challenges. That's exactly what those resources do. They're easy to locate, they're easy to navigate, and they're easy to implement. And so we need something like that for sustainability practices. So SAA is kind of the natural option when you're looking for these things. And they have also identified that sustainability and climate change are important to address within archival practice. However, when you go onto their website, it has broken links. There are multiple initiatives that are amazing, but don't seem to have any follow through after years of being up there on the website. And then they link to ALA, and they also link to other organizations like USGBC, which is helpful, but how helpful is it? Instead of going to SAA and trying to address these things, I feel like it was important to look a more narrow scope regionally. The United States has a lot of variation between their socioeconomic contexts as well as the different climate zones when you take into account the entire nation. So trying to fill the gap in the guidance that's provided by professional organizations through SSA instead. Okay, so we have developed an ad hoc committee on sustainability, and the purpose of the committee was to develop a strategic plan for environmental sustainability in SSA. And that strategic plan has been written and been submitted to leadership and is pending approval. After that is approved, the purpose of the committee will shift to implementing that plan. This strategic plan was put together by 7 members, Caitlin Bailey, Ed Benoit, Penny Clark, Mandy Hatman, myself, Cody Ledvina, and Aaron Wall. In the strategic plan, we have these 4 core values, the triple bottom line, which is environmental sustainability, social sustainability, and fiscal sustainability, DEI and environmental justice, resiliency and support. And we're trying to do everything on a broad 7-year timeline because SSA does run on volunteer support. And we're trying to make it so that items are achievable. And I'm going to go into a little bit more depth about the 5 goals in the next slide. Okay, so these are not in priority order. Our first goal is to identify the needs and practices within Southwestern archives, and then to identify the needs of SSA as an organization. I hope that in my previous slides, you've come to see that it's important that we develop facility guidelines and best archival practices for our repositories based on regional climate needs, and that's our second goal. Third goal is education. And again, I hope the previous slides kind of pinpointed the importance of providing relevant, easy to access, easy to navigate, easy to implement educational resources. Within education, we're also going to be working on professional development. The literature for sustainability in archives and library science has, there's a consensus within the literature that these topics of climate and sustainability need to be covered in library schools. So the third part of the education goal is to support graduate level curriculum that covers those topics. Within the SSA mission is to relationship build with other organizations. Another thing that is really common in sustainability literature is that the gaps in it are kind of bridged by literature from allied professions. So obviously library science, but also historic preservation, museum studies, information technology, and so on. So the fourth goal is relationship building. And then the fifth goal is mitigating the environmental impact of the SSA annual meeting. So that's sort of like our big thing every year. It's probably our biggest impact on the environment, especially when we have it in person. So trying to mitigate that impact. Okay, and then what are we going to do year 1? So trying to make it that some of the easier to implement things are at the front end, Also things that collaborating on initiatives that are already ongoing within SSA. So we're going to start compiling those resources. Is going to be one of the first things that we do, and that will be an ongoing task. Collaborating on a virtual option for the annual meeting. This is something that has already been in discussions within SSA, the different committees. So having that virtual option moving forward. So that would be collaborating on an initiative that's already underway. Collaborating with the Professional Development Committee to create workshops and webinars. The Professional Development Committee is already constantly working on different professional development opportunities. So that would also be collaborating with ongoing initiatives. One of the more ambitious things that we'd like to do in year one is start developing surveys or focus groups to research the current archival practices within Southwestern Archives. And we're hoping that this will result in a publication. So if you're trying to get some pubs on your CV, then this would be up your alley. And then also in year one, we want to start the process of looking at data from prior virtual conferences or virtual annual meetings, what's worked in the past, what our numbers are, what we could do to improve in the future. And then in Q4, we're going to start the process of drafting an annual meeting pledge, a sustainability pledge for the annual meeting. So that shouldn't be too difficult to accomplish. We're just going to be starting that draft at the end of the year. So it's a little bit ambitious, but I think that we'll be able to do it, especially if we have more people interested in participating. So if you do want to participate in the committee moving forward, please send me an email. And that is my presentation. How do I stop sharing my screen?
Thanks, Krista.
I'm not sure how to stop sharing my screen.
I'm going to force it for you.
Okay, thank you.
By now, okay, Daena, you can see your screen. Yep.
I can. Thank you so much.
Excellent. So just tell me when you need me to,
Okay.
slide it.
Okay. I'll make it as natural as possible. Hi, everyone. My name is Daena Carrillo, and I am a dual doctoral student at LSU. And thanks for the opportunity to be here. And I wanted to be able to share some of my research and what I'm working on as it relates to climate change and a lot of things that have been discussed in this session and so far throughout the conference. So I started off as a doctor of design in cultural preservation and archival studies. And my concentration was safeguarding ecological knowledge from the effects of climate change and taking an archival approach towards that. As I started taking a lot of my elective courses, I was really interested in more environmental science classes to add to it. So taking things like ecology, integrated environmental issues to kind of broaden my scope as an archivist and be able to see things through a different lens. That grew then into something else, and I decided to also pursue a PhD in environmental sciences. So my Doctor of Design is more of an applied framework that I'm building, and within my PhD, I am going to go ahead and take a lot of those ideas and concepts and apply them directly and use that framework within communities. You can flip it. Thanks. So I'm looking at how to create resources to help facilitate the preservation of community-based archives and ecological knowledge. And I'm looking specifically at the Louisiana coastal region and looking at ecological knowledge from a few different angles. Ecological knowledge can come in the form of traditional ecological knowledge or fisherman's knowledge, local knowledge, farmers' knowledge. So it's a broad way of looking at knowledge and kind of who's bringing it to the table. And the continuing on with what's already been talked about is that records and research that are created here and that are stored here in Louisiana are just, we're at a higher predisposition to the pervasive effects of climate change and natural disasters. So the idea that us as archivists, what our role is coming in and how we can help facilitate this process. My, I guess, interest and what really had me thinking was more about communities and areas that necessarily didn't have the kind of protections that a larger institution would have and what happens to them. And also looking at data and raw scientific data and knowledge, observational data, unpublished research, things like bioblitzes that are going on all over the state and in other states. Records from restoration groups and things like climate justice initiatives and collectives that are happening around us. How is this information being safeguarded and how can we help facilitate that? You can move to the next one, Ed. So I've took a couple of different steps to kind of work through looking at ecological knowledge and community-based archives. And the idea for me was that community-based archives function similarly to ecological knowledge, and ecological knowledge functions similarly to community-based archives. And the first part of that was identifying who are these narratives and the research that's related to the Gulf Coast and to climate change, and getting to know who those people are, being in these spaces, and understanding the unique needs of communities and individuals and researchers. And then how are those parallels similar to those with community-based archives? And once that's been established, to put together a toolkit of arrangement, description, and preservation that directly relates to the needs of communities or to people that are researchers and are collecting this information. And then the process of dissemination, how was that used to fill historical gaps, to safeguard that information? And that's 100% has to do with those communities and what their needs are and how they want to use their own information, because they are the creators, they are the controllers of that information. And sometimes it's just to keep within their own communities, to share with one another. Sometimes it's used to go out and advocate for things that are important to them, meaningful. You can flip it. So my toolkit development started with a case study that I'm going to get into in a minute, and a step of coding that information and developing a framework of what I was finding within this ecological knowledge of this individual. And this toolkit came about, and this case study, from working actually in the field and meeting the daughter of this gentleman named John Lands. And he was a engineer, thank you. He was a merchant marine, a civil engineer, a land surveyor, and he was a conservationist. So it was very interesting because he wore many hats. He worked within the government of Louisiana and worked alongside as an engineer with 6 sitting governors. But he was also interested as a person who lives in Louisiana and his love of the land and his connection to it. He specifically, I met his daughter when we were working, like I said, on a coastal restoration area where he actually had done work previously, and much of it is now gone because of land loss. So there is a connection, a deep connection that his daughter has with that space. And after sharing some time together and working on projects, I explained, oh, I'm an archivist, and we talked for a while. She said, you know, my dad has so much stuff and it's sitting in an attic somewhere and I don't really know what to do with it. And I said, well, what do you have? And she's like, oh, I have blueprints and I have photographs and I have all of his illustrations. And he worked on all these major projects here. And a lot of it is he used to get up on a prop plane and he used to fly around Louisiana and take pictures and write notes about everything he was seeing. And what I found really interesting was that she told me 1955, when he was taking a lot of these photos, and you can go to the next slide, Ed. He was talking about climate change before a lot of other people were talking about climate change. And she was very proud of that. She remembers that as a child. And so these photographs are in a book that he put together with all of his notes of all the different locations of where he has been over the years doing his own work, but also as a person from Louisiana who had a lot of pride in where he was from. And I think that this started the beginning of, this would be a great way of using a case study of his knowledge as a local, as a person that was also an engineer, and his expertise and how all of that information can be brought together to make a case study for a collection of what do we do with this knowledge that we have that could be beneficial for people that are studying climate change, for engineers. You know, there's a lot happening here in Louisiana with diversions and with creations of levees and all of the different projects. And he was a part of a lot of the earlier projects. And so much of his work can be shown in comparison to where the land is today and what's kind of happening. So I started working on and open coding all of this data, and I'm looking at locations, the geography, the dates, and his observations, lots of notes. You can go to the next slide. So these were notes and correspondences that he had. And this specifically had to do with, there were stress tests that were being done related to a cement device that was being placed in the freshwater diversion of a canal in Bayou Lamock. And there's letters upon letters upon letters and notations of him working on this project, along with brochures for cement companies and huge amounts of blueprints, which are on the next slide also. And these blueprints are chock full of materials used, dimensions, and would definitely be of a high interest for an engineer, let's say. And I would say there's close to about 100 of these that have been sitting up in an attic for at least well over 50 years. So once putting all of these pieces together, we were able to talk with his family about, you know, where do they see this information going? What would they want to do with it? How could they preserve it? Where could we use those resources? So that is kind of encompasses the Doctor of Design, and that brings me to the PhD work. I am lucky enough to be part of a grant with the National Science Foundation that Louisiana, Oklahoma, and Nebraska have come together, and it's called Rural Confluence, and communities and academic partners uniting to drive discovery and build capacity for climate resilience. And I was introduced to a tribal community here in coastal Louisiana who has worked with a few of the scientists that I've been able to work with, and they have a long-standing relationship with one another. And as they're working on other portions, and they've slowly become a part of this project, and the conversation about archives came up, and they had a lot of information that they don't quite know how to protect and what to do with. And their biggest fear is when we're leaving and we have to evacuate for a short period of time, we can't take everything with us. What do we do with it? And there's hundreds of VHS tapes, for example, of oral histories and papers. They're in the process of going through federal recognition, and they need some way to safeguard their materials. So we talked about what archives are and what community-based archives are and how one could go about building their own community archive. So their two biggest needs that they had were having an emergency plan for all of their materials, and as well as using those materials to bridge a gap between the elders and the younger generation, and how they could use their materials in order to do that. So the first thing that we talked about was this was a project that was solely created by them, that they only members of the community would create the privacy and the confidentiality within the project. No materials in any way would be removed from the community. And I was merely there as a person to be a collaborator, as far as a contributing only my expertise and what I knew about how to, or how you could organize, how you could prepare long-term preservation and sustainability. And then they can create their own meaning and significance based upon all the materials that they have. So we've started working together, and we're at the very early stages of the process right now. But I think it was really exciting to be able to be a part of a project like this, where I could take any sort of knowledge that I have learned over the years as an archivist and sit back and just give whatever they needed. And the descriptive language, you know, the big thing was descriptive language is created by the community. They're creating their own cultural protocols. The creation of the restrictions based upon culturally sensitive content is completely on their terms. And my role, again, is only as a contributor and just like full transparency at all time. And how can I be here to kind of assist in the process with that? And because issues of saltwater intrusion and land loss is very real, and the emotional factor is it's a really big part of the process. And I think that's something that has brought together both of the projects, is that that emotional component of climate-related disasters and climate change within communities. And as an archivist, stepping into that space and kind of holding space for that emotional process that's happening, and really hearing what those needs are so that you can help facilitate for the community. So. And that is about it for me.
Sorry, I need to, but this is just a good picture. That's a cypress tree, right? Daena, is that a cypress tree?
Yes, it is. Sorry.
Yeah, giganto cypress tree. Well, thank you very much. I see they're already.
I've resumed it. It is saved.
No more recording.
We'll stitch it together later.
We'll
If
fix it in
everybody's
post.
done, yes, we'll fix it in post. If everybody's ready, we've got a couple of questions here, if you'd like to get started.
Oh, sure, why not?
All right, so from Danielle, this toolkit idea sounds really novel and exciting. Are you planning to disseminate it more widely, or create sort of a template that could be adapted by other archival workers doing community-based work?
Yes to all of that. I'm hoping to graduate in December, which will be fantastic with my DDes. Ed is my advisor, and he's been very patient with me. So, and thank you for bearing with me as I was going through that. I had a whole idea of everything I was going to deliver today, and I have a house full of children who are chirping in my ear simultaneously. So I apologize and thank you if things did not come out as clearly as I would like to say them. But I absolutely would like to. The idea is to have that toolkit accessible, not only for archivists to use, but more importantly for communities, so they can use it for themselves and create on their own without us. We're kind of here just professionally to hold space and give what we know as archivists information, but ultimately they're the creators. They hold the control kind of thing. So yes, I want to do all that.
Awesome, thank you. We got another question from Era Tansey. Daena, is your research published anywhere yet? Even an early draft version would be useful. Smiley face.
Not yet, but I'll look at my advisor again and say, yeah, I want to do that. But yeah, I'm hoping to soon. Yes.
Great.
Yeah, I'll just jump in there and say,
Yeah.
Because I have seen various parts of various drafts of things, there are definitely some, although she may disagree with me, what I would call easy deliverables of how to, the DDES thesis can be, I think, quickly turned into at least 1 or 2 articles to go out. So I would hope so, yes.
Cool. And also, there are the links that Ed posted earlier are in the resources as well. Another question from Matthew Peak. For archives that are in institutions along coastal areas but cannot relocate or separate from the institution, what would you suggest for approaches to using the information you are accumulating in order to advocate for change for our archives?
Well, that's an interesting question, because I think any of the 3 of our things could be talking about that. So I'm just I'll start and then I'll hand it to Krista, because she might have some thoughts on the matter. From our perspective, one of our goals for the uses of our information is specifically for advocating, because in discussing, yes, my dog is having fun behind me. I was just looking at the chat. That a lot of times when you need to advocate for funding or for other resources, being able to put a specific grade, being able to say, look, we are at XYZ risk, and it has been defined by this, can make it a lot more poignant of a request, that, oh, there's data, and other people have said this is bad, not just, because I'm sure unfortunately, sometimes institutional leaders probably are used to us all saying, we would like some more money, please. Could we hire some more people, please? And being able to bring in outside authority can help with that. But I also think this is where Krista's work and the work with the sustainability, I have already forgotten. Is it a working group, or it's a working group, right? We're a working group.
Technically, we're an ad hoc committee.
An ad hoc, sure. But where those resources that we're working on as a group together can also be beneficial. And then from Daena's side, the framework and toolkit approach can also provide these things. And this is really where I'm hoping that our final institute, we can really bring together a lot of this work, and just give it, just bring it together in one place so that people can have access to all of these resources that have already been completed. So we're not just reinventing the wheel over and over and over again. Okay, that was a long-winded thing.
So, and I guess to follow that up, I know with records management, trying to advocate for that at institutions, at least in my experience, it usually helps to scare them with the legal liability and losses. And it's been helpful for me to team up with risk managers and legal at institutions when they exist. Is that something that you could see happening, like getting data about how much money these people would lose, to try and get them? Because I often find they react better when you scare them into how much money they're going to lose. And I don't know if this would work to that extent.
Well, something interesting that came up at now I've forgotten, is it the American Association of Geographers, Emily? AAG?
I know that's AAG.
No.
Can't remember what order it's in.
Hi, everybody. My name is Jill Trepanier. It is the Association of American Geographers, and I have been a member for almost 20 years, and I'm only now getting the order of those A words correct. So yes, that's it.
But our presentation, there was some very good feedback that I think we do need to look at, of looking at actuarial information from the insurance side of things, and bringing in, how do we collect data about master plans? Like, is LSU going to build a new library? Or if they are, where are they going to put it? And is that a 5-year thing, a 10-year thing? And really, again, trying to bring this data in somehow, but a lot of it is, oh, yeah, that sounds bad. A lot of it, we run into the data problem where there's so much data, and that trying to prioritize and parse through it becomes problematic. And this is when I reach out to collaborators and from other disciplines who might be able to do this better. I don't know, artificial intelligence might get involved, because that seems to always get involved somehow. Oh, Jill has her hand raised.
I sure do. And now I'm going to try to lower it while also doing, okay. Hi, everyone. So like I said, my name is Jill. I am one of the co-PIs on this IMLS project, and I advise Emily. So I'm here to just jump in on a couple of the last questions that were asked. So the first one, I think not the first one, the one about how it might assist in actually leveraging getting funds for folks. So my background is geography and climatology, and specific as what Ed just put in there, my background expertise is focused on extreme weather behavior and hurricanes. So there's this space for, sometimes I think in the past, people expected many of us to be experts in everything, right? So when we were there trying to pitch for bringing in money for a variety of different needs, we are often left scrambling, trying to find the right information from the right person, or we are expected ourselves to come up with it. And that's really what we're hoping these experiences through GIS really, they empower folks to feel like they have the right information to actually put forth to those without having to be experts themselves. So part of that in that focus, right? Because you're experts in many things, but I wouldn't expect myself to be an expert in archives. I have not been trained, right? Thus, the idea of climate change, I think bringing in this teamwork effort, teamwork makes the dream work, right? So there's that one piece. Now, also to add to the idea of actuarial numbers, insurance numbers, a lot of my actual background in research prior to embarking on these new adventures is thinking about actually that, right? So the actual economic losses as a product of extreme weather behavior in different places in Florida or different places around the Gulf Coast. There are, as Ed said, so much data that it becomes difficult to try to nail it down, and trying to find the right representative value of how much is actually lost. But certainly it is a plethora of possible places. And I think, certainly as long as I'm part of the team, I have background in the statistical estimation of, how often those extreme values of loss are reached. And so there are ways we can approach it that are very statistical in nature, but that are very much tied into money talks. And as much as I love to protect things for reasons that others might not agree, right? Those people who love money, we might disagree on the need and the purpose of why it is, but if we can get to the same outcome, and that is the protection or moving of resources that are threatened, then I think we're moving in the right direction, even if we're talking about two different goals, right? If the end result is still the protection of. So I just wanted to throw that out there, because we're certainly thinking about it. And as Ed said, we have some grant proposals that are in the works. And I think you just gave me another idea for another one. So I greatly appreciate that. And yeah, that's all I had to say. Thanks.
Well, and it's really interesting because this is loosely connected in the the Louisiana state legislation hearing yesterday talking about ALA, it was brought up again and again that after Hurricane Katrina and all the devastation and financial impacts, the American Library Association was the first conference to come. And they brought $30 million with them. And then the state didn't have to provide funding for helping libraries because the librarians did it. They did the fundraising. But that's just my connection of, money talks, particularly when it involves governmental agencies. Yeah, oh, okay. Maybe we shouldn't head down the insurance discussion because this might get really sad and depressing, particularly for anyone on the Gulf Coast.
I feel like it's already kind of not sad and depressing, but just with anything, I feel like digital preservation, it can be sad and depressing because just trying to get people to listen to you to get that started is also a thing. Like with any of these initiatives in archives, just trying to get people to hear us and understand what it is we do and advocate and yeah, I think just as with anything like digital preservation, just getting started in baby steps, I think are the best thing. So using the resources that people from work that people like you are doing, I think, and just reporting on it, at least we're doing something. At least we can say we told them, we've notified them, and we'll just continue telling them in the hopes they don't forget.
And resorting to hitting people over the head with a bat. The people frown on that apparently, but if you can hit them with a data, like data, and actually say
a data bat, yes.
Oh, that's almost too close to a database, but never mind.
Geez.
Okay, bad baseball references. Yeah, any other questions?
Well, if people are too sad, the cocktail hour is coming up after in an hour or so. But anyway, sorry, bad joke.
It doesn't provide us with the alcohol. We have to go get that ourselves.
Yeah, sorry, I couldn't, virtually send it.
There's DoorDash. You could have sent us all a DoorDash cocktail.
The registration costs would have gone up. All right, this is going down a weird loophole. Does anybody have any other questions?
Any real questions?
Would the panelists like to expand upon anything or, I guess, leave us with some hope?
Well, Krista,
So if I,
go ahead.
oh,
Jill.
go ahead, Ed.
I was just saying for Krista, is it your hope that all of the other major archives regionals would start their own ad hoc committee, working group, whatever they want to call it?
Yes. And that would also, it is also my hope that this would be beneficial in getting those resources available on the SAA website and within SAA as well. So,
well, and Melissa just shared exactly what I was thinking. There is the, oh God, what does the acronym stand for? The Regional Archives Association Collaborative?
Regional
Yes.
Archival Association Consortium.
Ooh, so
Yes.
close.
Yeah, so that I didn't get into that in my presentation, but yes, that is definitely at the forefront of my thoughts as well, because they have SAA has their sort of like fingers in all the different regional pots through the RAAC.
Great. Jill, what were you going to say?
So thanks, Ed. I was thinking, sometimes I give these presentations related to climate change, and of course I didn't give it today, but as part of that that sadness that comes after you talk about how people's areas will be flooded or things will be lost. And so I can appreciate the desire to try to leave a hopeful nature or a hopeful thought in the minds of those that are hearing it. So one of the things that I think our next phase after we develop this threat scale, which Emily and I will be playing with all summer, trying to get it right. But when that's done, there's this space for increasing the amount of information about the actual infrastructure that exists and whether or not it has some form of protective measures. So the simplest way to say that is Do you have a backup generator to hit that humidity level, to reduce that actual, I like to say, when the outside becomes the inside, right? If we can minimize that threat, then maybe that concern over the dew point, that grade increases a little and goes from maybe a C to a B as a product of an enhancement to the infrastructure itself to reduce that threat, right? So we don't have those data yet. That's going to be the next phase. But my hope is what it can do is support the initiatives for best practices of things that exist at other institutions that reduce their bad grade, and that thereby giving evidence for these things work in other places. And so it's not just here's my threat and here's my, sad face, this is what's the bad, but here are ways to actually try to solve this problem. And I think I'm all about solution-oriented ideas these days, because I'm tired of hearing about problems all the time. And I know that they exist, right? The problems are everywhere, but we have the capacity to provide information, I think, that helps people look at it more from a solution-oriented effort, as opposed to these are all the things are wrong, now give me money and fix it. That's harder to sell than the idea of, look at these other places and they're fantastic, ways of decreasing that threat. And so this is really just the beginning. Ed did not say this, but I think, it's interesting that he and we come from the same hometown. We never met until we were here at LSU together. And so I think there are some really great things that are going to come from this project moving forward. And we're really just at the beginning. So I'm glad to be in my very first archival group conference and discussion. It's the first time I've ever been in one, so I'm glad to be here. Thank you for including me in the group, but I think it's just the beginning. So if anybody has ideas or thoughts that are something that I myself might be able to help with, given my background, right, in that geography, physical science, atmospheric science space, please don't hesitate to reach out, because I'm excited to help and to be part of the world that you're in. So yeah, I guess that's my hopeful piece. I hope that I put a little bit out there for you.
Well, and Jill, you just made me scribe down another grant idea about,
Boom.
do you think we could get funding to install weather stations at risk GLAMs?
Absolutely, we could. I already got a network of 10, so I'm in. Yeah, easy breezy. No pun intended, or maybe the pun was intended. Weather station breezy, you get it? Come on. Getting ready for that mocktail cocktail hour, right?
Yeah, apparently.
Oh man, that was great. Sorry, I was over here chuckling. If you could, Jill, would you mind putting your contact info in the chat? If any of you can, I think, since the slides aren't up anymore, I think that's great.
Jill, do you want me to do it for you, or can you do it?
Oh, that's right. She's in her car. Sorry.
For the record, I'm parked awaiting my daughter's exit from her art academy. So I'm not driving, if that makes anybody feel any better. I'm just sitting here, but I actually can put it in there. Ed, it looks like you have that typing face right now, but I can do it. So no.
The typing face. Thank you.
The typing face. Do you know what I mean? Well, everybody gets it.
Well,
that's
actually,
like, yeah.
The face was me trying to remember what your email address was, because it auto-populates.
I've been on the West Coast too long, because I just assumed you were in a self-driving car, because those are things here, which is creepy. So
that's awesome. And yes, we are in Louisiana, so we're at least 3 decades behind where you're at. So I think that's okay. No, I hope not that bad, but no, I'm just sitting here. That would be cooler, but just kind of hanging out.
Awesome. Is there anybody else that wanted to speak up before we head out? We've got about 15 minutes left, but we can always end a little early too. Anyone? Nope. Well then, is Fleur coming back? Oh geez. Sorry, I just read Christina's comment, and they can't dodge San Francisco ones either. It's pretty bad. But yeah, I think that's it. So thank you, everybody. We'll stitch the 2 recordings together. They'll be available next week. So yeah, we'll keep y'all posted. You'll get emails about all that. Thank you so much. Really enjoyed this, and I hope you'll have a great rest of your session. Make sure to hit the mocktail hour in a bit at 6 o'clock Central Standard Time.
Yes,
and there's going to be trivia. And buy your Slotto tickets. Yes. Slotto, if anybody here is new to SSA, Slotto is Scholarships Lottery. It's how we raise money for our scholarships so that people can attend conferences, get professional development help, even helps out. I think there's even student awards that help out with books and other things. So please, by all means, check out Rally Up via the lobby to the event to check out Silent Auction and Slotto. Thank
And
you.
if anybody wants, you can bid on the thing I'm bidding on for the silent auction because I'll keep bidding.
Oh, so drive it up. Is then that illegal to, or well, it's SSA.
It's
So go
for
have some fun and check out the lobby, and we will see you later on tonight at the mocktail hour. Thank you.
Adios.